You trust the name on the screen. You match the license plate, get in the back seat, and surrender your safety to a complete stranger for the next 20 minutes. It's a transaction we make without a second thought. But what happens when the person driving you isn't who they say they are? These stories explore that terrifying moment when the ride home becomes a journey into darkness, and you realize the stranger you trusted has other plans. It was 2020, a time when the world felt disjointed, and I was trying to piece together an income by driving for Uber. After being laid off, the late-night shifts were my new reality. You get used to the rhythm of it, the drunks, the quiet ones, the awkward encounters, but no routine could have prepared me for a particular ride in the heart of October. It was past midnight when I dropped someone off near the edge of town. Almost immediately, a new request pinged. The pickup was 6 minutes away at a strip mall, in front of a bowling alley that had long since closed for the night. The name was Derek. The area was silent when I arrived. A few dim lights cast long shadows across the empty parking lot. Under one of them stood a solitary figure, a tall man in a gray hoodie, hands buried in his pockets, head down. As I pulled to the curb, he looked up, his face obscured by shadow. I confirmed his name, and he gave a slow nod before getting into the back seat, directly behind me. The destination was 20 minutes away, in a residential neighborhood I didn't recognize. His voice, when he confirmed the address, was flat, devoid of any inflection. It was unnerving. We drove in silence for several minutes. I glanced in the rearview mirror occasionally. Each time his eyes were fixed forward, not on his phone or the passing scenery, but on the back of my head. The feeling of being watched, of being studied, made my skin crawl. I tried to break the silence with a casual question about his night. A long pause stretched before he answered, his tone unchanged, mentioning only a need to get away from somewhere. He offered nothing more. I didn't push it. 15 minutes in, we entered the destination's vicinity. The neighborhood was isolated, with no streetlights and large, dark yards shrouded in trees. As we neared the address on the GPS, he leaned forward. He pointed to a house on the right, a dark, dilapidated structure with an overgrown lawn and peeling paint. It looked abandoned. He instructed me to pull into the driveway. My gut screamed that something was wrong, but I complied, stopping the car and putting it in park. He didn't move to get out. He simply stared at the dark house. After a moment, he exited the vehicle and walked around the side of the building, disappearing from my view. I sat there, the engine humming in the oppressive silence, my mind racing. The ride was technically still active. 2 minutes passed, an eternity of indecision. Finally, I ended the trip on my app. I was done. I began to back out of the driveway, but before I could shift into reverse, he reappeared, walking quickly toward the car. His hands were empty, but his face held a strange, intense expression, a mixture of anger and excitement. A primal fear told me not to let him back in, but I unlocked the doors, a foolish instinct to avoid confrontation. He opened the rear door and slid inside. He wanted to go somewhere else, a new, unspoken destination. I insisted he use the app, but he just stared at me in the mirror, silent. The weight of his gaze was immense. After a tense standoff, he indicated he wanted to return to the pickup location. I didn't argue. The drive back was even more suffocating. I could feel his eyes burning into the back of my skull. When we arrived at the deserted strip mall, I parked under the same dim light. He got out of the car, but left the door open. He stood there for a long moment, half in, half out, and looked directly at me. His stare was filled with a chilling intensity, a silent message that passed between us. Then he shut the door and walked off into the darkness behind the bowling alley. I sat there for a minute, too shaken to move, the unspoken threat hanging in the air. When I got home, I checked my ride history. The trip was gone. No name, no record. It was as if it and he had never existed at all. In 2021, driving for Uber was my full-time job. I live in a tourist city, and the summer nights were always busy. I preferred the late hours, less traffic and more lucrative fares from the bar crowds. This night began like any other Saturday. It was around 1:30 in the morning when I accepted a pickup request from a man named Chris. The location was odd, a side street behind an old strip mall, away from the usual nightlife spots. I found him at a corner, hoodie on, staring down at his phone. He got in the back without much acknowledgement. He seemed sober, just intensely quiet. The drop-off was a 25-minute drive to a suburban neighborhood on the other side of town. It was the kind of area that became pitch black at night, with few streetlights and dense woods between the houses. About 5 minutes into the silent drive, I noticed something strange. He was holding his phone in his lap, but the flashlight was on, casting a weird upward glow in the cabin. I asked if everything was all right, and he just mumbled an affirmative before turning it off. The rest of the drive was filled with a palpable tension. Something felt deeply wrong. When we arrived at the destination, the house was completely dark. It looked empty, uninhabited. He didn't respond when I asked if it was the right place. He just sat there, staring out the window. After I repeated the question several times, he finally nodded. I put the car in park, wished him a good night, and waited. He didn't move. He just sat. Finally, he reached for the handle and stepped out, but he left the door open, standing on the curb and facing the dark house. Seconds turned into a full minute. I was about to say something when he turned around, his face unreadable in the dim light. He looked at me and then motioned back toward the way we came. He wanted to go back to the pickup spot. My mind reeled. It was a long drive. I gestured for him to use the app to request a new ride. He just stared at me, then shook his head, a look of desperation creeping into his eyes. He seemed to be pleading. I held firm, pointing to my phone and the app. It was then that I saw it, a tremor in his hands, a genuine fear in his eyes. He looked from me to the dark house, a silent story of terror playing out on his face. He seemed to want to say something, but no words came. Finally, he backed away slowly and closed the door. He walked toward the dark porch and was swallowed by the shadows. I waited until he was out of sight before pulling away, a deep sense of unease settling over me. A few blocks away, I stopped at a 24-hour gas station. I needed a moment to process. I parked, locked my doors, and went inside for maybe 4 minutes. When I returned and got back into my car, my brain short-circuited. Chris was sitting in the back seat. Same hoodie, same vacant expression. It was impossible. I had locked the doors. I stared at him in the mirror, my heart pounding against my ribs. He looked at me, then looked past me, back in the direction of the house, his breath fogging the window. A profound, unspeakable terror seemed to emanate from him. I didn't know what to do. I started the car, and against my better judgment, began driving back. The entire way, he was a statue of fear, rocking slightly, his eyes wide. We pulled up to the dark, silent house again. He got out without a gesture, walked to the front door, and just stood there, facing the wood, motionless. I didn't wait this time. I drove away, my mind grappling with the impossible events of the night. I was 26, visiting my then-fiancée, Sarah, in Washington, D.C., for her basic training graduation. I flew in a week early to spend some time with her. We decided to explore the historical sites, A first for me. We walked for hours, seeing the monuments and memorials. It was a great day, but by the end, we were exhausted. We sat down under some shade, while Sarah requested an Uber on her phone to take us back to our hotel. After about 10 minutes, a gray-colored minivan pulled up to the curb in front of us. It wasn't a designated parking spot, so it was clearly stopping for a reason. Sarah motioned that this was our ride. Too tired to question it, I followed her to the car. She opened the back door, confirmed her name with the driver, a man who gave only a slight nod in response, and got in. I slid in behind her. Looking back, our stupidity was staggering. We didn't verify his name, the license plate, or the car on the app. We just got in. The driver pulled away without a word. The silence was strange, but I chalked it up to an unfriendly driver and leaned my head back to rest. What felt like only 5 minutes later, Sarah tapped my arm sharply. I opened my eyes and saw a look of pure panic on her face. She didn't speak. She just pointed to her phone. The screen showed the Uber app's map. The blue line indicating the correct route to our hotel was on one side of the screen. The icon representing our car was moving steadily in the opposite direction. As my stomach sank, a notification popped up from her actual Uber driver, asking where we were. The picture of that driver in the app was not the man in our front seat. My blood ran cold. We were in a stranger's car. I slowly looked toward the driver, my mind racing. I didn't know his intentions, but I knew we had to get out. I leaned forward and calmly told him we had changed our minds and would get out here. He glanced at me in the rearview mirror, his eyes empty, and then returned his gaze to the road. He didn't slow down. He didn't acknowledge my request. He just kept driving. My patience ran out. Adrenaline surged through me. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out my pocket knife. I flipped the blade open, the click echoing in the silent van. I told him, my voice shaking with a mixture of fear and resolve, that he was not our driver and that he needed to pull the car over right now. I made sure he could see the blade gripped tightly in my hand. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror again. This time, he saw the knife. He slammed on the brakes, and the doors unlocked. We wasted no time, scrambling out of the car as fast as we could. The moment we were out, he sped off. We stood on the sidewalk, shaken, catching our breath. We later learned from our real driver and from news reports that there had been multiple instances of people posing as drivers to prey on tourists. People had gone missing. We were lucky. Our exhaustion had almost led us to a horrifying fate, a reminder of how thin the veil of safety truly is. And so, these stories come to an end. But some questions linger. If you realized your driver was taking the wrong route on purpose, would your first instinct be to confront them or to silently search for a way out? Let us know in the comments below. See you in the next one.